Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for a new webinar from ISAC's Global Chinese Catholicism Project. I'm Eva Salerno from the Catholic University of Paris. As you know, our project brings together researchers in the humanities and social sciences and explores the different realities of Chinese Catholic communities around the world. One of our main aims is to promote young researchers and their work. And today we are very delighted to welcome a young researcher, Astrid Sifa Salsabila, who will talk to us about the Chinese Catholic hybrid identity from the case of Muntilan, Central Java, Indonesia. Astrid Sifa Salsabila obtained a master's degree from the Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies at Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia, presently working as a research assistant at the Modern Endangered Archive Program, a partnership between UGM and the University of California, Los Angeles, to recover Chinese religions' endangered materials in Central Java, conducting research in Muntilan, specifically on Catholic mission history, Chinese religions, and interreligious relations. Possess a primary scholarly interest in Catholicism and other cultures, particularly regarding Chinese Catholics in Java, Indonesia. Many thanks, Astrid, for being here with us today. We are privileged to have Professor Chang Yao-hun with us as the respondent. He is a professor at the Institute of Asian Studies and former director of the Center for Advanced Research, University Brunei Darussalam. He is also an adjunct research fellow at the University of Western Australia, honorary director of Institute of Brunei Studies at Guangxi Minzu University, and advisor of Center for Southeast Asian Studies at South China Normal University. He serves as the editor-in-chief of the Asia in Transition book series at Springer. Professor Hu specializes in Chinese diaspora, identity politics, multiculturalism, and religious and cultural diversity in contemporary Southeast Asia. He's the author of Christianity and the Chinese in Indonesia, Ethnicity, Education, and Enterprise at Liverpool University Press. Thank you very much, Professor Hoon, for agreeing to participate in our webinar. For our audience, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat. I will now hand over to Astrid for her presentation.
Okay, thank you, Professor Salerno, for the opportunity. And I would also like to thank from Isaac Research for inviting me to share my research in Muntilan. It also grateful for Professor Chang Yu-hun for willingly to discuss more about my research, and also perhaps he could also share his research as well regarding Christianity and Chinese in Indonesia, because I use many of your writing as well in my research to conduct my research in Muntilan. So now I would like to share a little bit with all the audience about my research in Muntilan, but please feel free to share as well. And also, if I don't say, I say something not clearly, please do let me know in the chat box. Okay. So, wait. Okay, I have issues. Okay. Yeah. So actually, Catholic community in Indonesia is not quite big, as the nation actually is a majority Muslim population, and we, the Catholic adherents throughout the country, is only consists of approximately 8 million, or around 3% of the population. So in Indonesia, we have like a rigid did a categorization of religion, and in Indonesia, Christianity is formally categorized at two different category, which is Protestantism and Catholicism. So this number of Catholicism is not include the number of the Protestant Catholicism or other Christian denomination aside of Catholicism. And in Indonesia, actually, it's kind of hard to number the Chinese descent, because the Chinese already been in Indonesia since the early of 5th century, and then many of them already married and having child with the local people. But the ICS tried to number the Chinese descent in Indonesia, and they found it was around 2.8 million million people, or 1.1%. And actually in Indonesia, the diocese in Indonesia did not have quite a rigid number of the Catholics based on their ethnicity. But one of the record that I found during my research was the Atmajaya Research Center found that many Catholic converts came from Chinese background in 1975 until 1980s, because during that time there was quite a huge conversion happened due to the New Order era, where the Indonesian government tried to make a quite rigid regulation for the Indonesians to have a formal religion, and many of the Chinese converted to Christianity, including Catholicism. And then in Reformation era, this is important time, because in the New Order era, the Chinese were restricted to express their Chinese characteristic. I mean, in this characteristic means to conduct customs, to conduct culture, or to express everything that related to the Chinese, their ancestor, because of the accusation that Chinese related to the Communist Party, which during the New Order era trying to oppress by the Indonesian government. So therefore, in 1998, when the Indonesian government tried to disband the restriction of the Chinese expression, there are many rows discussion that Christianity, including Catholicism, hinders the Chinese from implementing and practicing their ancestral characteristic. It's mainly happened in Java, perhaps also happened in several other island in Indonesia, but because of the diverse historical and also ethnical context in Indonesia, I will mainly try to discuss in this presentation that is happened in Java. And then, okay. So I specifically did my research in Muntilan. So Muntilan actually is a small sub-district in Central Java in Indonesia. So it's located in Java. It is clearly it's quite close with Borobudur Temple. So it is in the same sub-district, and it's located in the south of Borobudur. So I chose this location as my research, actually at first, because it was my also a fit work for my project with the digitalization of old Chinese religion materials in the Chinese temple. But there are also several reasons why I chose this place because of its historical significance. So for the for the Indonesian Catholics, they know that this area known as the Bethlehem van Java, because this area was selected as the Catholic mission site in Java by the end of 19th century. And at first, Father Franciscus van Lith, who was a Jesuit or from the Congregation of Society of Jesus, chose this area to promote Catholicism to the Javanese. However, his promotion of Catholicism through mission works in education also attracted the Chinese, and even the priest also established Holland Chinese School in the Catholic school complex. And this interest also arose until the Franciscan nuns who arrived in Muntilan also established the second Holland Chinese school in the area. And interestingly, after the coup d'etat that made the New Order era happen in Indonesia, many of people in Muntilan also tried to convert it to Catholicism, although it did not specify that all the converts were Chinese, but there were several reports that many of the Chinese converted to Catholicism during that era, despite previously, when Van Lith tried to promote Catholicism to the Javanese, many of the Chinese also interested to convert to Catholicism as well. And in the Kafikepan Kedu, so Kafikepan Kedu is like the second level of the territorial segregation of the Catholic hierarchy in Indonesia. And in this area, there was only two parishes that holds Chinese New Year Mass annually, and one of them is Muntilan. Interestingly, because Kafikepan Kedu, located in the middle of Java. So mainly the Chinese who firstly came to Indonesia, especially to Java, mainly resided on the north part of Java. But Muntilan, specifically also the Kafikepan Kedu, was located in the quite southern part of Java. So, and also it was not have quite many Chinese compared to the northern part of Java, but interestingly, it still holds Chinese New Year Mass since 2004 until now. And then when I came to the Chinese temple in the area, so Muntilan also had a Chinese temple named the Hok An Kiong Temple. And several people who knew about my research regarding the Chinese Catholic, and then they said that Christianity, including Catholicism, contributed to the decreased number of the people who visited the Chinese temple, and also who practice the Chinese characteristic. But on the other hand, when I talked with several Chinese Catholics regarding this claim from the mostly came from the non-Catholic Chinese, they said that actually Catholicism give them a space to continue their ancestor characteristic, and most of them use the term inculturation. So the term inculturation is widely popular in Muntilan because mostly people will refer to on how Father Van Lith tried to accommodate the local characteristic, mainly Javanese, to the Catholic teaching in order for them to try to express their Catholic expression through through the Javanese characteristic. And this is the picture of the Van Lith tomb in Muntilan, and we can see that there is a place to put the hios or the incense when they try to pray for the priest. And it's common to find this pot in several places in Muntilan, as many of the Chinese still continue to use the hios for praying. And so this is Muntilan. This is a specific profile of Muntilan. And actually the Catholics and the Buddhists are quite low compared to the Muslims, but they are still have a significant influence throughout the area. And this is important because that in Indonesia, the government formally recognized six religion that can be put in the official document, which are Islam, Protestant Christianity, Catholic Christianity, Hindu, Buddha, and Confucianism. Unfortunately, I could not find the number of the Confucian adherents in the area because the local government did not record it specifically. So they did not give a specific number of Confucian, but I also find the column of the other religion. But I could, unfortunately, I could not identify which religion that consists in the other religion that is written in the formal document of the Muntilan government. And also, despite quite a number of the Chinese, many of them are there are 140 Chinese parishioners in Muntilan, and mainly they resided in the Pemuda Street or Jalan Pemuda. So it's the main road in Muntilan, and mainly the Chinese Catholics work as a merchant in this area. And when I first came to the area, people said this area as the Chinatown of Muntilan, because since the early ages that the Chinese descendant resided in this area to work as a merchant, and several of them passed the trades, passed their company to their children and also to their grandchildren. And this Chinatown also emphasized by the existence of a Chinese temple that I've mentioned, which is the Hock An Kiong Temple. And it still became the hotspot for the Chinese to gather and doing some social activities. And also the Catholic mission site of Muntilan is still active until now. And when you come there, you can still find the old church and of several churches and monasteries that was built since the era of Father Franciscus van Lith. Okay, so in this research, actually, I tried to see the dynamics and the contestation of how the Chinese Catholics try to build, to construct their identity as a Catholic, because I found that even the single identity of Chinese Catholic actually manifested in diverse way. So therefore, I tried to see these issues through the lens of hybrid identity, which was popularized by Homi Bhabha, that he tried to see that actually there are the contestation for individuals to try to contest it and negotiate it, their identities, and it's a continuous process. And it also, I try to add the perspective of official and popular Christianity, which is popularized by Frank Wysen, to see that actually Christianity is separated by how the church tried to regularize on which things, especially related to local characteristic that align with the Catholic doctrine. But on the other hand, the popular Christianity tried to see on how every individuals or groups of Catholics try to integrate their local characteristic with Catholicism with their own agency. So this is the main site of my research in Muntilan, the Kelenteng Ot Hang Kiong, or the Hock An Kiong Chinese Temple, and Gereja Santo Antonius Padua Muntilan, or the Saint Anthony of Padua Church, Catholic Church. Actually, my fieldwork did not only limit to these two places, because I did my fieldwork approximately 6 months by living with the community. So I tried to see as how the Chinese Catholics in everyday life as well, aside from what they did specifically in the church or in the temple. So interestingly, the Kelenteng Hock An Kiong was perhimpunan, was under the Perhimpunan Tempat Ibadah Tridharma, So Tridharma is the local name for the Samkhau teaching. So in Indonesia, the Samkhau teaching was formalized, and they have their own organization. And interestingly, now the PT was under the Directorate of the Buddhist Community under the Ministry of Religious Affairs. Despite that, there was also the teachings of Confucianism and Taoism that could be found and still implemented in the temple. And for the church, and since the start of the Catholic mission until now, the church is being led by the Jesuit priests. So I found, based on what I've read and also what I found, that the congregation also influence on how the Chinese Catholics try to express their Chinese Catholics identity, including in the organizational level in church. And as I mentioned before, that the inculturation and the understanding that the Catholicism is accommodating the local characteristic is mainly known and mainly used by the Catholics in Muntilan, especially in the Chinese Catholic as well, but not much as the Javanese, because this inculturation mainly discussed by the Javanese Catholics, as Father Van Lith tried to emphasize that specifically to the Javanese during his missionary works in Muntilan. And so this is the specific historical context about what happened to the Chinese Catholics in Muntilan. And one of the things that interests most is the golden harvest of the Christian conversion in Indonesia after the 30 September movement in 1965 that I've mentioned previously. This golden harvest term I tried to use, and I took from a priest who did work in Muntilan, and he said that it is indeed that actually during the 1965 it really supported so many Chinese to convert to Catholicism, not only Chinese but also many Indonesian, because if you didn't register yourself to the recognized religion in Indonesia, you will be assumed as the affiliated with the Communist Party, and it will harm you, because in our history, I mean Indonesian history, the affiliated groups or individuals to the Communist Party had quite disadvantage, even sometimes until now. And because of that, specifically in Muntilan, and then the Chinese Catholics converts developed a Chinese Catholic families, and eventually it grows to a quite big Chinese Catholics community. And the Jalan Pemuda, the Pemuda Street, also become the biggest and known Chinese Catholic community in Muntilan. Although there are several Chinese Catholics live outside the Jalan Pemuda, but mainly when I asked them where I could find the Chinese Catholics in Muntilan, and many of the Muntilan citizens could refer me to the Jalan Pemuda. So there are four main factors that I found that related to influencing the Chinese Catholics individuals to develop a hybrid identity. So the first one is the family. So family played a role on how whether the Chinese Catholics try to develop, or they try to integrate their Chinese and Catholic identity. This is especially because mainly my interlocutors during my research were born or raised during the New Order era, where going to the Chinese temple was quite not forbidden, but they they were afraid to go to the temple because they were afraid that if I showed that I have a relation with Chinese organization or Chinese uh, temple, I could be affiliated to the Communist Party. So therefore, many of them try to hinder their Chinese characteristic by, for example, not continuing doing prayers to their ancestors and then choose to pray through masses instead. And some of them also still continue to pray to their ancestors by through the Chinese style, which means that they made a specific altar at home and then try to do like several rituals, such as like the Chinese New Year celebration or the Changbeng, but in the home level. So when the Reformation era happened, many of the Chinese Catholics did not continue to go to the temple again because they've already get used by the what the family taught at home. But then also several Chinese Catholics continue to go to the Chinese temple afterwards because also their family still had relation or still going to the temple and emphasized the importance of the temple to them. And the second one, the social opportunities. So during the Dutch East Indies era, the Chinese was categorized as the second level citizens by the Dutch East Indies government. Uh, because the first level was the European, the second one is the Chinese, and then the Japanese, and then the Arabs, and the last one was the locals or the Bumiputra, or in Dutch they said inlanders. And this ambiguity of being the second citizen made the Chinese try to like try to possess the same rights as the European. And then during in 1910, the Dutch East Indies government passed a policy for the Chinese. If they became a Christian, including Catholics, they could obtain the same right as the European. And it also made the Chinese interested to convert to Catholicism, because I found several families in Muntilan that has been Catholic since their ancestor who lived in the 90 by the early of 20th century. And also the acquisition avoidance of involving with the Indonesian Communist Party also uh, encouraged many of them to convert to Catholics. So I heard one of my interlocutors said that their family and immediately tried to convert to Catholicism after the New Order era started because they were too afraid. And then afterward, uh, she continued to be a Catholic because she felt like it was the things that she was taught by by her family. And then also, Catholic educational institution became one of the influencing factors because I found it was interesting that the Franciscan nuns have two elementary schools until 2009, which was separated. The first one was the St. Joseph Elementary School that mainly attended by the Chinese, while the second one, the Mater Dei Elementary School, attended by the Javanese. So this segregation happened because the St. Joseph Elementary School was the former Holland Chinese school that the nuns established in 1936. But nowadays, the school already merged as the St. Joseph Elementary School. And I found that many of the interlocutors attend this school by generation. So there was a family who I encountered that her grandma, and then the mom, the daughter, and their granddaughter attend in the same school. And interestingly, when I talked with one of the former teacher of the school, she said that actually, despite they tried to make a different elementary school based on their ethnicity, in the Chinese school during the New Order era, they did not teach the children with the Chinese characteristics because the school were too afraid by with the government will ban the school if they teach the Chinese characteristic to the children. But they realized that actually the school separated the children based on that ethnicity. And then the last one is Catholicism is better than Protestantism. It is also related with the filial piety or the Shao. So, for example, one of my interlocutors said that she converted to Catholicism because her grandparent told her that uh, if you want to convert to Christianity, choose Catholic, not Protestant, because many of the Chinese have the assumption that if you converted to Protestantism, you could not continue to pray for your ancestors. And therefore, she decided to go to choose as Catholics. And I had an opportunity to go to her house during Chengbeng, and they designated an altar for their ancestor. Even she said that the family, the Chinese Catholic family of her, prayed to their ancestor who had the descendants of Christians, because the descendants did not continue to pray in the Chinese characteristic anymore. So this claim was really emphasized by the Chinese Catholics that made them still close to their identity as a Chinese. And one of the interesting thing that I found during my research was uh, in a temple, actually, so in Indonesia, we have like an interreligious organization made by the government under the Ministry of Religious Affairs, named FKUB, Forum Kerukunan Umat Beragama. And then the temple was asked to give the FKUB two representatives, because mainly they knew that the Chinese temple was like emphasized the teaching of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. So they tried to ask the temple for the representative from the Buddhist and also the Confucian. Interestingly, in Muntilan, the Confucian representative of FKUB was a Catholic, and he emphasized that. And he said that actually he was chosen as the representative of the Confucian religion because, first one, there was no Confucian adherent who came to the temple, and the second one, he was known as the Chinese characteristic masters because in Muntilan, unfortunately, many of the Chinese did not have, based on what they said that the Chinese in Muntilan did not have quite adequate knowledge about the Chinese characteristic. And they found that this person of the Chinese, the Confucian representative had a good understanding about the Chinese characteristic. And this one in the presentation was one of his writing that he published in a Confucian religion magazine in Kemang. So it's the different area in Indonesia. And then when talking about meditation, he said that almost all religion advocate their followers to act based on love towards their neighbors. And then he quoted a similar um, words with the Bible of Matthew regarding the Great Commandments. It was not only written in this Confucian magazine, but he emphasized that whenever there was meetings or visits to the temple. So when there was visit to the temple from, for example, the church or the schools or the universities, he would be the representative of of the Chinese temple, and then he would emphasize things similar like this. And when I asked, why did you do that? I mean, like, why you quoted words, I mean, like literary words from the Bible. And then he said that he was actually raised as a Catholic. The Catholic teachings embedded in him, despite he did not continue to pray in the Catholic Church anymore. But he still considered himself as a Catholic and still emphasized the teachings, as including in the Chinese temple. Despite in the Chinese temple of Muntilan, there was contestation whether the non-Confucianism, the Confucian, the Taoist, and Buddhist could be fully involved in the Chinese temple. And this is the Chinese New Year Mass. So I found one of the writing of Professor Chang Yo-hun regarding the Chinese New Year Mass, and it was really interesting. And it also inspired me to discuss quite much about the Chinese New Year Mass in Muntilan, because I found it was not only about the religious experience or religious spirit, but also political. Because in Muntilan itself, the Chinese New Year Mass started in 2004 after our president, former president, Megawati Soekarno Putri, stated that the Chinese New Year Mass as a public holiday. So in Indonesia, we have quite many public holiday based on the religion are recognized by the state. And one of them was the Chinese New Year Mass. And actually, many of the Chinese Catholics interlocutors in Muntilan said that this Chinese New Year Mass was started or were initiated by a Jesuit priest who was a Chinese descendant. And he asked the Jalan Pemuda, which was the concentrated Chinese Catholic in Muntilan, to manage the Chinese New Year Mass until now. So it still continues despite the priest already changed throughout years, but the people of the Jalan Pemuda still continues to manage the Chinese New Year Mass until this year. So I also participated in this Chinese New Year Mass to see that it was still similar person that I saw during the Chinese New Year Mass that I attended in 2024. And one of the significant thing that I found during my research regarding the Chinese New Year Mass in Muntilan was the establishment of Chinese New Year Mass was significantly influenced by the priests. Either it was the Chinese descent priest or the Chinese-minded priests. So during my research in Muntilan, there was a priest who were graduated from Hong Kong, and he was well known as a Jesuit priest who had the expertise in Buddhism. And he and many of my interlocutors said that this priest had quite advanced knowledge regarding Chinese characteristic rather than them. But interestingly, the priest actually was a Javanese. So during the Chinese New Year preparation, many of the Chinese Catholics tried to follow this the priest, because they assumed that the priest had more knowledge about the Chinese characteristic rather than them, because they also find a confusion to revive, quote unquote, revive their Chinese characteristic that they did not done during the New Order era. And this confusion arises that they have to align it with the Catholic teaching, which means that did what they do in the Chinese New Year Mass by adding Chinese characteristic is still aligned with the Catholic teachings. and it showed the popular official Christianity, because mostly the Chinese New Year Mass still managed by the priest. I mean, like they tried to find approval from the priest regarding what things that could be added in the Chinese New Year Mass. But the other hand, I found that they were also a part of popular Christianity that happened in the Chinese New Year Mass, because uh, the financial capabilities became one of the significant things that made the Chinese New Year still continues until now. The Chinese Catholics emphasized that the financial capabilities became their support, their contribution to the church, because many of them could not actively join in the church because of their work, because of their business, and etc. But in substitution, uh, they found that the church also need money in order to be run, and then this is they try to see this financial contribution as their expression of their contribution to the church. And during the Chinese New Year Mass, you can also find the ang pao giving. So after the mass, usually the priest give the kids and the teens the ang pao to the people, and it has been continued to be done until now. And so the conclusion, the diversity of Chinese Catholic in Indonesia is not only limited geographically, but also individually. And the concept of hybrid identity demonstrate how Chinese Catholic individuals have the agency to define their Chinese Catholic identity. So this this concept of hybrid identity also emphasized the popular Christianity that sometimes was seen as syncretic or forbidden by the Catholic authority. But on the other hand, it also signified that the expression of Catholicism are also diverse. Even when I went to several Chinese New Year Mass in surrounding parishes of Muntilan, they also have a different expression of that. So this research of mine in Muntilan just a glimpse of the Chinese Catholic fragments that is developed by the Chinese Catholic throughout Indonesia, and it also might be different in time, because the other aspects such as political and social contexts also influence on how the Chinese Catholic develop and manifest their identity in daily life. And perhaps that's all from me, or perhaps I still have time to share the videos of the Chinese New Year Mass, because I thought that the time was quite not much. But
Yes,
yeah.
I think you can ask it if it is not too long.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will try to cut it, I mean, like around 1 minute or 2 minutes, so the audience could have a glimpse of
Yes, don't
what.
worry.
Okay, sure. Okay, let me share the videos. Uh, a glimpse of a Chinese New Year Mass in Muntilan that is held in 2024. Yeah, perhaps that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Astrid, for your very interesting presentation. And I will now hand over to Professor Un for his comments. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much, Astrid, for the very insightful presentation. I knew nothing about the Chinese in Muntilan, let alone the Catholics in Muntilan, and I find that case a very interesting one. You were very modest in claiming that the Catholics in Indonesia are of a small minority of 3%. I mean, 8 million Catholics is not exactly that small. In contrast, in Brunei, where I am at the moment, the Catholics made up of 3.6%, which in real number means about 17,000. 17,000. There are only 3 parishes here in Brunei. So it's, we're talking about a very small minority. So the late Pope Francis used to describe the Catholics in Brunei as a periphery within the periphery when he appointed Cardinal Sim, the bishop of the Brunei Catholic Church, to be a cardinal. So I totally can agree with you, the idea of being a minority within a larger sort of non-Christian context. But yet, 8 million Catholics in Indonesia is actually quite a lot. But the case of Muntilan is interesting, not just because it is, the first mission site in Java, but also it seems to me that, it is a very doable field site because the number of Chinese Christians about 400, below 500. So it's actually quite a nice site to do research, right? And it has a very clear kind of competitor, the Kelenteng, the Chinese temple, which was established around about the same time in the late 19th century, which was juxtaposed against the Catholic Church of Saint Antonius. So I find that contrast really interesting. In the turn of the century, the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, there were fierce contestation of what it meant to be Chinese in Indonesia, right? Some of the Chinese reformers in the late Qing dynasty came to Southeast Asia to try to garner support of the Chinese diaspora in either trying to support reform within the late Qing dynasty empire, or to garner support for the new Chinese Republic. So the Chinese diaspora in the periphery was quite important, especially Chinese in Java, which got influenced from China, some of these Chinese reformers on the concept of Confucianism. So in 1900, the first Chinese organization was established, called Tianghua Huiguan, the Chinese organization, and then one of the main aims of that Chinese organization is to revitalize or re-Sinicize the Peranakan Chinese, right? The Peranakan Chinese were the Chinese who have been very much assimilated because they have been, like what you say, migrated to Indonesia for many generations, and they are a product of mixed marriages and so on. Now, so a lot of them then have lost many aspects of their Chineseness. They don't speak Chinese, they don't recognize a lot of Chinese cultures and customs and so on. So in 1900, with the establishment of the Tianghua Huiguan, the Neo-Confucianist ideas started to spread in Indonesia. And so among these Peranakan who have lost their Chinese identity, this became quite an interesting obsession. So they wanted to re-identify their Chineseness, especially on one hand of the Dutch continuous sort of marginalization of them, and they sort of felt a sense of threat from the new wave of Chinese migrants from China, the Totok, who are the new wave of Chinese migrants who have got a stronger sense of Chinese identity, who can still speak Chinese dialects, who took with them Chinese wives and so on. So then the Peranakan felt very insecure, and then they started to re-Sinicize. And this is when also the Confucius temple, the Konghuchu religion, started to establish itself as an institutionalized religion. And it was a very interesting time in the early 1900s up to about 1930, where Chinese media, there was at the beginning of the press nationalism as well. The Chinese presses, the Peranakan Chinese newspapers, and then there was some Totok Chinese newspapers and so on. And so all these newspapers then became a site where all these contestation of Chineseness happened. The Samkao, the three religions adherents, and the Confucians will claim that they are the real Chinese, whereas the converts, the Christian converts, have become Dutch and they have lost their Chineseness, right? So they are sort of betrayed, they have sold out, they betrayed their Chineseness, they're no longer Chinese. So there was this saying that, masuk Kristen, masuk Belanda. So when you become Christian, you become a Dutch, right? And of course, in terms of legislation, laws and so on, the Chinese Christian did actually have a higher status compared to the non-Chinese. They were considered as Dutch in some instances where they were, they were under the Dutch court jurisdiction and not the local court jurisdiction and so on, especially in colonial Indonesia, where race were divided into this hierarchy of the Europeans on top, and then the foreign Orientals, mostly the Chinese, in the middle, and then the locals, the natives or the indigenous or the pribumi at the very lowest level in that hierarchy. Now, so there was a lot of advantages and benefits of becoming a Christian during that time. And what was interesting in the contestation in the early 1900s is not just the contestation between the Peranakan and the Totok, the Totok, of course, was trying to prove the Peranakan as being inferior in their Chinese identity, because it felt that these are hybrids, they are mixed breed and so on. And then the Peranakan, especially those who re-Sinicized, who went to Chinese schools and then took up Confucian religion and so on, then tried to prove the Totok wrong because they felt that they have re-Sinicized and so on. It was not just between Peranakan and Totok, but the contestation was also between the Confucian and the Samkao, the three adherents of the three religions, and the Christians, both Catholic and Protestants. And then among the Christians, there was also contestation between the Catholics and the Protestants as well. So at that time in the early 1900s, the religious marketplace in Java was a hugely contested one. It was, all over the media and the press, people attacking each other, claiming, themselves to be more Chinese and more authentic than the other. And then what happened in the late 1920s were really interesting. That a Chinese missionary called John Song, a very famous Chinese and very charismatic Chinese evangelist, came from southern China, from Fuzhou, to Southeast Asia to evangelize. So he has got all these massive gospel rallies that he converted tens of thousands of Chinese in Singapore, in Malaysia, and also in Indonesia, in Java especially. And that was really interesting because John Song embodies a very traditional Chinese. He spoke Chinese. He often would wear the traditional Chinese gown. And yet he is also very Christian. He sees himself as a spirit-filled Christian, very charismatic, and so that actually helped the Javanese Chinese to find a and identity. It gave them this role model of understanding that you can be Chinese and Christian at the same time. Because before that, for about 20 years, you know, the Confucian keeps saying that you guys are not real Chinese because real Chinese cannot be Christian. And if you're Christian, you become Dutch, right? So John Song sort of came to afford them a new form of Chinese Christian identity. So I thought that was interesting. So on one hand, we see all these very messy kind of contestation within culture as part of this contestation of the Chinese identity in the early 20th century Indonesia among the Chinese community. But on the other hand, there is also this aspect of social class, right? The Peranakan and the Totok occupy different social class. The Peranakan mostly are the old rich, right? So they, especially the Christian ones, have access to the economy, a global economy, because of the association of being Christian, which is a global religion, which tapped them into the whole Dutch economy and so on. And then in the 60s, after the coup attempt in 1965, the Chinese schools were all closed down by 1967, and the military-backed assimilation program in Indonesia forced the Chinese to change their names, forced them to shut down all the Chinese presses and Chinese organizations and Chinese schools. And so the Chinese, because the coup, the Indonesian Suharto's government accused Beijing for being involved and accused the communists of being involved in that coup, right? And so in the purge of communists across Indonesia, the Chinese became the collateral. The Chinese also became the victim. And of course, you know, there were a lot of Communist Party members who were Javanese and Balinese and so on, and a lot of them were purged. So the Chinese actually are not the main victims, right, compared to a lot of non-Chinese. But they were the victims culturally post-1965 because of the absence of Chinese schools. So imagine all these hundreds of thousands of Chinese kids suddenly lost the ability of going to school. Now, the Indonesian state school did not have the capacity to absorb all of them into these schools. And a lot of Chinese parents did not want to send their kids to state school because of the stigma of, you know, the education quality in state school, and then also the stigma of being a minority for being Chinese, because at that time it was a very precarious time to be Chinese. So they were very afraid that if their kids go to state school, they'll be bullied, and then worse still, they will be attacked, right? Because the Chinese were being seen as communists during that time. And then it was exactly during that time where you talk about the golden harvest, that there were so many people converted to Catholicism and Christianity just to get away from the stigma of being Chinese, right? So there were documentation saying that the priests would have to, because, you know, there are so many converts. Every week there are thousands and thousands of converts, so they could not really baptize all these new converts in time. They have to take the, they have to use the water hose to spray on thousands of converts so that they all get baptized at the same time, right? So there was the golden harvest, or they call it the great harvest, in the mid-60s up until about the 80s. But what we cannot overlook is the role of the Christian schools, because after the closure of the Chinese schools, the Christian school then became the site where Chinese parents put entrust their kids in these schools. And because the Catholic school, as you have noted, were established in the late 1900s, and also in the early 1900s. So they have a long tradition of providing very elitist and very good global education, especially Dutch modern education. Now, so then and then there were also evangelical Chinese, evangelical Christian schools and so on, and all these schools used to only cater for the Christian population. Most of the school children are ethnic Chinese. But then after 1965, the majority of them became ethnic Chinese. So the school then became synonymous with Chinese schools, even though they don't teach Chinese. But then because of the of the population of the students are majority Chinese, right? So then they became a site of a very exclusive Chinese congregation of Chinese kids. And then from the Chinese parents' perspective, these schools provide quality education. They are safe for their children, right? And then they are very disciplined, and so on and so forth, and provide modern education. But then from the church perspective, well, they have expanded all these schools. They have, opened up a lot of new branches in a very short time. They have to recruit new teachers and everything. It became a new economy in itself. So Christian education became a very important source of income for the church. And also they see the Christian schools as a site for evangelism. Very, very important mission sites. Now, so I suspect that a lot of the conversion actually happened because of the kids who converted in these schools. Then they went home to actually convert or invite their parents into the church, and then the parents later on get converted, because especially with traditional Chinese parents, they would not want after they die, they would not want their tablets not being worshipped, by the descendants. So if the whole family has converted into Christianity, they would also convert into Christianity. So they would be reunited, in heaven, so to speak. So at that time, there was a very interesting time where contestations did not just occur sort of culturally among the Peranakan and Totok, and also the Sangkao, Confucian, and also the Christian, the Protestants versus the Catholic, but also it is a very social class kind of identity. Being Chinese is synonymous with being middle class, and very synonymous of being Christian at the same time, because a lot of them go to Christian schools and got converted there. And Christian schools then became a very important site where Chineseness is reproduced, renewed, even though it does not involve in any kind of Chinese language or culture at all, right? But it is a class identity that actually then defined that generation of ethnic Chinese during Suharto's time. And then, of course, after 1998, after the fall of Suharto, Chinese identity is no longer taboo. Then we see a mushrooming of Chinese language education, very different outlook of Chinese. We synthesize younger Chinese. I just want to make one last observation about the Chinese New Year Mass. Chinese New Year Mass is interesting because this couple of years in many social media and TikTok and so on, and then attracted a lot of interest from not just Indonesia, but then also from Singapore and so on. And I've seen video clips of some of these Chinese New Year Mass, very similar to what you took or what you show us. But then in Singkawang and in Pontianak churches in Kalimantan, and because the Chineseness or Chinese identity in Pontianak is much stronger than Java, so some of their performances within the Chinese Catholic churches there is a lot more concentrated, more kental, yeah. So what's really interesting is that when I look at the comments in TikTok, especially, a lot of the Singaporean Christians, Singaporean Catholics who watched those videos actually wrote very strong comments against this kind of, compromised behavior or performance. This is no longer Catholicism, this is not Christianity, they have compromised, this is not what the Bible teaches, and so on. So you see this reaction from more fundamentalist Christian against the practice of this very hybrid Catholic, Chinese Catholic Christians in Indonesia, right? So I found that dynamics also very interesting. So thank you very much, Astrid. I don't want to take out too much time because I'm sure there are questions from the audience. Back to you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Professor Hun, for your very interesting insights. And so I give the floor to Astrid if she she wants to answer.
So I answered the response from Professor Hoon or the question that is already written in the chat box.
Sorry, maybe you can react to Professor Hoon's comments, and then yeah, we will read the questions in the chat box.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Hoon, for your comments and the detailed insights about the Chinese Catholic and also Chinese Christian in Indonesia, because I indeed read a lot of your writings about the Chinese Christians in Indonesia, and this, I mean, like reading about these topics show me that identity of being a Chinese Catholic is truly complex in Indonesia. I mean, like either the contestation and then the hybridity, and even in several levels, either personal, family, even in organizational. And related to the Chinese New Year Mass, yes, indeed, I also knew about the issues in Pontianak, where the one of the things that they I mean, like the fundamental Catholic protested was the why the barongsai could enter the church. And actually it was not only happen in Pontianak, I also found it in Yogyakarta. So in a parish and the Saint Franciscus Kidul Church, they also put the barongsai inside of the church, but they did not play the dance in the church, only just like to um accompanying the priest or the offerings to be given to the altar. And also in Kalimantan, I indeed found that the Chinese identity or characteristic were mainly shown in the Catholic Church in the organizational level. But in Java, in I mean, like for example, in the Archdiocese of Semarang, where where Muntilan parish was here, it was quite not too strict. I mean, like they did not have quite specific regulation related of Chinese New Year Mass, but perhaps like in the Diocese of Surabaya, once there was the bishop who forbid the Chinese New Year celebration in the church, which was implemented by Monsignor Vincentus Vincent's, oh, I quite forgot his name. I just remembered that. Yeah. It was happened in 2012 as far as I remember. So I mean in Java itself, the expression of Chineseness even in the Catholic Church was still quiet. Well, it's quite pros and cons amongst the Catholics, even by the Chinese Catholic itself, because the bishop in Surabaya was also a Catholic, was also a Chinese descendant as well. And perhaps that's what I could add, because I think there are several people who wants to give some insight of question that they want to share with us.
Yes, thank you, Astrid. I can read the first question from Dedi Cristanto. Sorry for my pronunciation. Thank you for your presentation about Chinese and Catholicism in Muntilan. I somewhat understand that the Muntilan area because many of my friends are from Muntilan and I used to go to the Catholic Church in Muntilan often. One thing that I always remember about the history of Catholicism and Muntilan is the murder of Father Sandiaya and Brother Herman Bowen's Jesuits in front of the churchyard of Muntilan. This murder was carried out by the Hezbollah youth. My question is, how do Chinese Catholics in Muntilan remember this tragedy? Because until now, the grave of Father Sandiaya has become a pilgrimage site for Catholics in Java who know about this tragedy.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dedi Cristano, for the question. So this tragedy of Father Sanjaya and Friar Bowens are still being remembered in in Muntilan. I also doing research in this topic, but mainly related to the interreligious relations between between the Catholic and the Muslims. But for the Chinese Catholics, in Muntilan, for in the organization level of the church, the expression of the Chinese identity is still limited to the Chinese New Year Mass. So, I mean, like, for example, compared to the other parish in the Jakarta or Semarang, who also have the Chinese concentrated community, they have quite numerous ways of expressing the Chinese, for example, by do weekly Chinese masses every week in Jakarta in Glodok parish, but in Muntilan in institutional level they still limited to the Chinese New Year Mass. But for commemorating Father Sanjaya and Friar Bawans, they still participated in like Sarasehan or like the meetings to remembrance and also pray together with the fellow Catholics. And even when I went to the tomb of Father Sanjaya and Friar Bawans, I also find a pot of putting a joss stick to pray for them. But I mean, like it's mainly in the personal level, but in the institutional level, they still followed like the how the mainly Catholics did things, which mainly they use Javanese characteristics. For example, last year was the 75th commemoration of Father Sanjaya and Friar Bounce death, and they had this sarasehan or meetings to discuss about the reflection regarding the tragedy. And I found that they they use Javanese characteristics, such as they use Javanese languages, and then they have like a short drama, but they use the the Javanese characteristics, and yeah, mainly still use the Javanese characteristic. But I still found several Chinese Catholics who also involved in this event, and they, for example, one of my interlocutor used the Javanese style clothes, because I realized that mm, almost all my I think all my interlocutors still have like Japanese descent as well. So, and because of the things that happened, for example, the 1960 the New Order era restriction, they quite more inclined to be familiar to their Japanese characteristic compared to the Chinese. So it is also portrayed in and how they commemorate Father Sanjaya and Friar Bounds until now. Yeah. Okay, perhaps do you have any other response or
Thank you,
questions?
Astrid. Yes, there is another question from Dedi Cristanto.
Mhm.
So I'm going to read it. In 1965, it was the bloodiest power transition in Indonesian political history. I agree that during that time, many people had to choose a religion and many also became Catholics. Nonetheless, the Catholic community in Indonesia then grew quickly and significantly in numbers. The experience as a legacy of the Dutch may have been one of the negative identities that still persist in Indonesian society, especially among Muslims. Interestingly, from the previous presentation, during the bloody tragedy of 1965, Chinese people in Indonesia chose Christianity or Catholicism. In fact, by choosing Catholicism, they bore a double burden as a minority. Why did the Chinese choose Catholicism instead of the majority religion that would guarantee their safety?
So in the case of the Muntilan Chinese Catholics, based on my research, the first one that I found why they choose to be a Catholics, because of their education. As Professor Hun explained previously, that many of the Chinese interested to enroll their students to the Christian and Catholic schools, and then it makes them be familiar with Catholicism, and then they also try to promote this idea of Catholicism to their families. And during that time, so one of my interlocutor also said that prior to the 1965, the Chinatown was known as quite concentrated Catholic community. So it can be seen that actually before the 1965 itself, many Chinese already became Catholic. Because I also find several families in the Muntilan already been a Catholic for several generations. And the second one, the reason why they choose Catholicism instead other religion, because, for example, at first I have an assumption, why they didn't convert to Buddhism? I mean, like related to the Samkao, I mean, like related to the Chinese temple, Buddhism was the closest quote unquote official religion to the Chinese. So I mean, like therefore they uh, could not entirely discontinue their identity as a Chinese if they want to. But then in Muntilan, one of my interlocutors said, because Buddhism was quite had a strong connection with the Chinese temple. So if you look in the map, so in Magelang sub-district, there is a Theravada Buddhist temple named Vihara Mendut. So before they established the Vihara Mendut in 1970s, the Theravada monks usually did sermon in the Muntilan Chinese temple, in the Hot Ankyong temple. And therefore, the connection between the Buddhist and the Chinese temple are quite strong until now. But consequently, in the 1965, it made the Chinese were not brave to choose Buddhism, because the Buddhism still had a strong connection with the Chinese characteristic, whereas they tried to save themselves from being identified as a Chinese by converting to other religions in order to avoid the accusation of affiliating with the Communist Party. Perhaps that's a glimpse of the reasons why they choose Catholicism in Muntilan compared to other religion. But I think it might be different with another places, because I mean there are also like geographical context and historical context on why Catholicism became one of the main religion that the Chinese choose in Indonesia during that time.
Thank you, Astrid. There is a comment from Father Ari. Just want to share that in Chinese Catholic parishes in the Philippines, our Lunar New Year masses are very similar to what Astrid shared. Lion and dragon dances inside the church, ancestral altar and rites, red liturgical color as liturgical color, etc. So I see that there are no more questions in the chat. For the audience, please really feel free to raise your hand if you would like to take the floor. And so I will ask Astrid a question myself. I really enjoyed your presentation, Astrid, and I have also worked on Chinese Catholic communities in the diaspora, but in Europe. So I am very interested in your topic. And I have a few specific questions. I was wondering, where are these Chinese Catholics from? I mean, which provinces or regions of China did their ancestors come from? And so I was wondering also if they speak some Chinese languages, Cantonese or Tizhou or others. And is the Mass in Chinese parishes celebrated in Mandarin? And so in which language were you able to conduct your interviews?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Salerno, for the question. So mainly, the Chinese descent in Muntilan came from the Fujian province. So mainly they speak Hokkien. And unfortunately, when I did my field work, there are just a few people in the area who can speak Chinese. Because as Professor Hun said that the new order era truly made the Chinese quite became far with their characteristic, including language, and even when in the Dutch East Indies era, where I mean, like they became quite distant with their ancestral characteristic, and therefore I think there was only 2 person that I met who still can speak Chinese, and both of them were elders. And for the young generation, they did not speak Chinese, and even they can only speak Indonesian and Javanese. They even one of them have like quite good Javanese language. I mean, like for the Javanese youth itself, it is quite not common to have like so have a high Javanese level language. So Javanese language have several level. So the high level is mostly used for to the elders, and also for example, to the royals, because in Yogyakarta we still have a royals. But nowadays the Indian, I mean, like the Javanese youth, could not cannot speak. I mean, not many of them can speak that, but there was a young generation of Chinese descent can speak that fluently, and he was become one of the representative of the church to going to like the elders in the Catholic community. And for the Chinese New Year Mass, it is used Indonesian language for the masses. But as I mentioned previously, in 2018 until 2024, when I conduct my field work, the priest was Hong Kong graduate, and he could speak Chinese. So during the Bible reading, he tried to use Chinese for the reading, and then the other priest speak in Indonesian in order to show the diversity of culture and language, especially because it was a Chinese year mass. But honestly speaking, many of my interlocutors claimed that they did not understand what he said. So therefore the Chinese language in the Chinese UMS just become a symbol, not still become a symbol for the Chineseness, but it it could barely understood even by the Chinese Catholics in Muntilan.
Okay, thank you so much, Astrid. And I see that Michelle has a question.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. So I'm going to play not the devil advocate, but usually Isaac we're trying to push for a more social science approach, and that's really what you did, giving great insights on the sociological and historical background about how these communities of Chinese Catholics came to exist. But I can't help but notice that the golden age is in 65. So of course, you explain very well all the Indonesian political context that explain partially those conversations. One question I have for you, for those people tonight who have knowledge on Indonesia, is do you think 65 is also the end of the Council Vatican II? So which will push for a range of reform about local leadership, stronger local dioceses, local clergy, use of local language in the liturgy, more flexibility with indigenous culture, a different view on other religions. And so there is all kind of renewal in how we perceive a range of things in the church. So do you think that this Vatican II era also played a role in facilitating the shift of those Chinese Indonesian population towards the Catholic Church? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shamlun, for the question. So, in the case of Muntilan, I noticed that the Second Vatican Council, one of the things that became quite significant change was the openness of the church with the local characteristic to be inputted in the, for example, the liturgy and etc. But actually, in the case of Muntilan, it has been done since the start of the Father Van Lith. So Father Van Lith, aside of doing Catholic mission through education to the locals, but he also tried to emphasize the Javanese characteristic into the locals. I mean, like into the Catholic liturgy, for example. So based on the reports that I found throughout my research, Father Van Lith already emphasized the Catholics in Muntilan to conduct what is widely known as inculturation, or by emphasizing the localness in Catholicism expression. I even found several photos that shown that even the Javanese people use Javanese languages and musics that is done in the mass. And during that time, I mean, like in the Franciscus van Lith era, it was still not quite common. And I found that the second Vatican Council emphasized that more rigidly for the churches, local churches, to be open for that. Even like the local leadership has been emphasized by Van Lith during his era in the early of 20th century. Indonesia even already have the local bishop named Monsignor Alberto Sugia Pranata, because Van Lith already imposed the significant for the locals to emphasize their localness related, I mean, like in terms of the Catholic expression and Catholic faith. And I think that the second Vatican Council made this stronger. I mean, like what have been done in Muntilan.
Thank you, Astrid. Maybe Professor Hun wants to add something, or it is okay?
Oh, no, I sort of just am reading Evan Tanadi's comment on the comment box and find it very fascinating because he lives right on the street where Astrid does the research. So I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Yeah, so I let Astrid read the comments from the chat box. Yes, they're very interesting. So I'm so sorry, but unfortunately we have to stop here. Time is running out. So I would like to thank again Professor Hun, CY, and Astrid for taking the time to be here. And thank you also to the audience for joining us at the start of summer. So, and of course, I would also like to thank the man behind the scenes, Michel Chambon. So thank you, Michel, for your support in the entire organization process. And I hope to see you all again soon at our next webinar. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.